Welcome everybody who's joining us to watch the recording. This is our first and third second Tuesday of the month, and we are going to continue our discussion on communication approaches. So I will hand it off to Jen.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer Trujillo. My colleague here is presenting with me too. I'm from the Wyoming Department of Ed, Deaf and Hard of Hearing Outreach, and my colleague is Christy.
Hi, I'm Christy Fritz. I'm teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing. I work for Department of Ed. So go ahead, Jen.
Today we're going to talk about combination communication approaches. Last time during part one, we talked about different approaches that you could use with your child, such as American Sign Language or signing exact English or listening and spoken language. Today we're going to talk about the combinations because a little bit of one and a little bit of another might be what works for you and your child. So that's what we are going to discuss today. We're going to go to the first one. The first combination approach is called sign-supported speech. This is where we use a little bit more speaking with a teeny tiny bit of sign language. So a lot of times parents or teachers might use this one where the child is focusing more on listening and spoken language or hearing and speaking, and they use signs to clarify and support the use of spoken language. So there's not as much sign and there's more talking and listening. I do have a video that we're going to show you guys. This is an actress who is hearing. She was in a movie with a little deaf girl, and the actress won an award, and now she's going to accept her award, and she's talking, and then she's using some signs to support what she's saying. Before we watch the video, I wanted to say that this might be good for kids who are in a new environment, they're learning new information, or they're in a loud environment and they can't hear as much. So you're supporting their listening and spoken language with signs. So let's watch the video.
And she's not using American Sign Language, I don't think. Is she? She's using British.
No, I think it's British. Yeah. So
Yeah.
if you know some signs, you might be like, oh, these don't really match, but
Yeah.
it's British. But see if there are some signs I think you guys might know. So let's go ahead and watch this and compare kind of her speech to her use of signs.
Oh God, hello. I made a promise to our 6-year-old lead actress that I'd sign this speech, but my hands are shaking a little bit, so I apologize. Thank you. Our movie is about a deaf child being born into a world of silence. It's not exaggerated or sensationalized for the movie. This is happening. Millions of children all over the world live in silence and face communication barriers, and particularly access to education. So deafness is a silent disability. You can't see it and it's not life-threatening. So I want to say the biggest of thank yous to the Academy for allowing us to put this in front of a mainstream audience.
All right, so you can see from that video that she's using a lot more speech and a little bit less sign. I saw a couple words like movie or sorry and promise. So that's what we would call sign supported speech. Now I got to get out of this window.
Oh God, hello.
There we go. Okay, the next one we're going to talk about is, oh, if you guys haven't ever seen that movie that she's talking about, it's called The Silent Child. It's a really good movie. You can just Google it. It's a short film, about 20 minutes on YouTube. Okay, the next one is called simultaneous communication. This is otherwise known as SimCom, and sometimes people will refer to it as total communications. This one uses more signs than sign-supported speech that we saw in the previous slide. It's a lot of people will talk and they will sign at the same time, and their signs are usually in English word order and they match what you're saying. One language is usually stronger than another because it just kind of tends to take over. So then the other language tends to get a little bit watered down. I'm going to show you another video at the bottom here, and this is a hearing mom. She's using total communication to explain something that her toddler did. The dad is deaf, and usually when they're together, they use ASL, American Sign Language, and when they're around hearing people, they use simultaneous communication. So we'll watch her explain this one.
You'll never believe what my toddler said to her teacher at back to school night. So to give you some context, my husband is deaf and we use sign language in our family. So if dad is here, we're voice off, we're signing. If there's hearing people, sometimes we simcom, which is what I'm doing now, speaking English and signing at the same time.
So if you compare that one to the first one, you probably would be able to see a lot more signs, and she was talking and using the signs to match her English word order. Okay,
You'll never believe what my toddler said to her.
So that one is total communication.
Hey, Jennifer, can I ask a question?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
for SimCom and total communication, is that the same as signing exact English then, or not necessarily?
No, it's not the same. That's a good question. It's not the same as signing exact English. It kind of seems like it because they're doing it in English word order and she's saying each sign while she's talking, but in signing exact English you use a lot more of the word endings like the ing.
Oh, that's right.
And
Okay.
the is, and I don't think she was using is or the, but in signing exact English you would be using the and is and those
Okay.
little pieces of words like s and ed, things like
That
that.
makes sense.
Make sense, Olivia?
Yep, that does.
Okay, thanks for
Thank you.
asking that question.
It tends to be a lot more of, I think, a pigeon sign or a conceptually accurate signed English type of sign, because it's even hard. I mean, especially for a hearing person to sign ASL and speak in English is hard. And so we tend to go back, we fall back into more of that pigeon signed English or conceptually accurate sign, where we're using a lot of ASL signs, but in English word order. And I
Mhm.
think that's what I see mostly in Wyoming for sure.
Yeah, which by your guys' definition of a language, we would say no, that's not considered a
Correct.
language. Okay.
Correct.
Mhm.
Yeah. Good questions. The next one that's a combination approach is bilingual bimodal. And this one is using two languages at the same time. Let me get my clicker here. Two separate languages used at separate times. One is ASL in this case, and one is spoken language. You use two complete languages, so you don't water down either one. You don't use half of one and half of the other. The child is learning both languages, but they're learning them at separate times. So if you kind of want to think of like a Spanish immersion class where kids go to school and they learn Spanish during part of the day and they learn English during part of the day. I mean, we've all heard of those. Those exist in Wyoming too. That's kind of what this one would be, except for you're learning sign language and spoken language at the same time. I mean, it's at separate times, but the children are learning them while they're growing at the same time. Both languages are equally valued and represented, so neither one of them is used less, or we say we don't like that one. That's not how this goes. Both languages are used in the environment at intentional times. So they might be teaching sign language at one time and English at one time. An example of this in preschool might be, say it's art time and the kids are going to their art centers. We might have one art center over here where the kids are painting and the teacher there is using spoken English. So all the kids in that center are talking and listening. Kids in another center, they might be doing something with clay or Play-Doh or something like that. And they have a teacher who is fluent in American Sign Language, and all the kids over here are using American Sign Language. So the important part of this one is that you have two fluent models, two fluent adult models. So one person using fluent spoken language and one person using fluent sign language. So that's an example of that one. I don't have a video for this one. Sorry, guys. The next thing we wanted to talk about was additional communication approaches. Sometimes everything that we're doing might not be enough. So depending on what the child needs, we might use something different. So the ones that I brought up today were assistive technology and tactile. Assistive technology is augmentative and alternative communication. So if the child needs something additional in order to communicate, it can be a high-tech thing like a fancy device that has lots of different buttons that the child might push, or maybe it's a little bit low-tech, like just doing some sort of like a picture exchange or using a Big Mac switch. It's important to know that just because a child is deaf does not mean they need to use assistive technology like AAC. There's lots of candidacy or criteria that you can use to say, hey, I wonder if this kid would be a candidate for using other types of communication. Okay, and the next one we have is tactile communication, protactile American Sign Language. This is where people are using sign language and they're using their touch to communicate. So I have a really neat video that I'm going to show you guys on this one. This is most often used with people who are deaf-blind, and you can feel the language through touch. And it's not necessarily just feeling someone make the signs, it's touching like your shoulders or their legs or their hands. First video we're going to watch is just an example of assistive technology. You guys might have seen these before.
My name is Tommy.
Dog. Woof, woof. Woof, woof.
My name is Rose. Hand mixer, give. Me. Hand mixer.
My name is Emily.
I love it. That was so cool. I love it. That was so cool.
Being nonverbal doesn't mean
We can't speak.
we want to show you who we are.
Anywhere.
And
anytime.
My name is Tommy.
So that was augmentative and alternative communication. A lot of the programs that are available for people now, you can add in sign language to the programs. You can add in videos. So if you want to have a video of somebody signing something, or you can insert pictures of sign language that will, instead of the icons that have a picture, it can be somebody using a sign. So a lot of those programs can be compatible with deaf children. And then I'll show you the video of American Protactile Touch American Sign Language. This is for people who are deaf-blind. So that was protactile touch sign language. Does anybody have any questions about either one of those? The documentary, I saw a documentary on the protactile touch sign language, and it's really neat. It's just to kind of let people who are deafblind know what's happening in the world around them. So they talk about, somebody's laughing or somebody's coming up, and they talk about how the room is set up. So, okay. The next thing we're going to talk about is choosing a communication approach for your child or your family.
Yeah. So just some factors. Obviously, not every communication approach is the same for every child, and your child might change their mind or lead you down a different path. So we need to just kind of encourage parents to really look at their child's individual needs. So for your own child, looking at what your child's individual needs are and what your family's needs and desired outcomes are. So if your family has decided, well, the goal for my child when he or she is, older, I want my child to be able to talk and function in a hearing world and not need to rely on sign language. well, then you know that maybe what approach is going to work best for that child and your family based on those goals. But of course, just because a family might choose that approach, or you might choose that for your child, doesn't necessarily mean that maybe what is what your child chooses. And so we just need to encourage you to pay attention to what your child's needs are as well. Maybe your child lives, maybe you and your child live in an area where there's a lot of deaf people, or you have deaf people in your family, and you want your child to be able to SimCom and use both, be able to communicate with deaf family members or peers, as well as hearing peers. So maybe you choose a SimCom approach. It just depends on what your child's needs are and what your family's needs are. Also, what resources are available to you? What's available in the community? If your family is choosing just a sign approach with no listening and spoken language, are there enough deaf people who sign and deaf peers around for your child to be able to communicate with other people? Or is there opportunities for the school to learn sign language or connect with others who know sign language? Same for technology. If you're choosing a listening and spoken language approach, what kind of technology does your child have, and what kind of resources are available to make sure that technology is in working order? As far as education options and settings, in Wyoming, we don't have a deaf school, but if your family's goals is for your child to attend a deaf school and be around other deaf people and learn sign language or maybe SimCom, what kind of education options are there for you? Well, there might be, if you're choosing a deaf school, it can happen. It would just need to happen out of state. And so is that an option that your family is open to? So just those different types of considerations. Go ahead, Jen. And like I said, your child might lead you down different approaches at different times during their development. Maybe when they're younger and they're bridging that gap between speech and language, they're using some sign, and maybe you're using some sign supported speech that eventually turns into either sign language or speech, whichever situation is different. A child who might be at home, 0 to 3, maybe that communication is very one-on-one or in a small group, and it's in home when it's a little bit quieter and things are known. And then when your child goes to preschool, that's a different environment. There's new concepts and new listening situations. And so their access needs might change, where they might use more sign language to get that information. And then again, when they go to kindergarten, it might change. And then again, middle school, it's constantly kind of this reevaluation, so to speak, if you want to ensure that they have access. Just trying to be open to different approaches is great for families because, again, if we're open to different approaches, we're able to be flexible in how we're providing information to our child. Family involvement and learning is critical, no matter what approach is chosen. If it's cued speech, if it's listening and spoken language, if it's sign language, the family being involved and having the ability to communicate with the child within the family using that child's communication approach is so important. It's important for their social emotional well-being, for your connection to your child, as well as for their overall language development. If your child is the only one signing in your family and nobody else signs with that child, then that child will only be able to communicate with another person who knows sign at school, or a friend who knows sign, and they might feel pretty lonely about that. And then also just for parents to understand, you don't need to be an expert in deafness. We realize that most deaf children are born to hearing families. I mean, that's a reality. And so you don't have to be an expert in deafness to even choose a communication approach. You can just jump in and start working on what's best for your child. You know your child best. You love your child. You know what your family dynamics are. So you know what's going to work best. So you don't need to be an expert, but it's pretty interesting when families have young children and then they choose a communication approach, they quickly kind of become the experts, in what they're doing. So, hi, Jen.
One day you might be helping somebody else.
That's true.
I
Yep,
did want to
ma'am.
say one thing about your child may lead you to different approaches at different times during their development. I worked with a student. The student has cochlear implants, and they learned sign language all throughout their growing up years, and they had an interpreter. They still have an interpreter. They're in high school now, but they don't really like to use the interpreter that much because they're using their listening now. So it's just a whole range of starting from when you're very little to when you're in high school, and they're going to change along that
Yeah.
route. So
And some of those kids even grow up and go into middle school and high school, and they're using their listening and spoken language, and maybe they've used sign in the past, but now they are good, strong readers and prefer speech to text for their access in the classroom. You know, maybe that's just their accommodation in the classroom. There's just it looks different for every kid.
Yep.
Yeah. So just exploring options. Here's just some ideas for families as they're exploring options and continue to explore options, talking to other families, caregivers, and deaf and hard of hearing individuals who use a variety of different approaches, asking them like, what works really well? What are the celebrations and what are the challenges? Like what's really hard about this and what's amazing about this? And getting kind of a full picture. Look into a variety of resources. There's so much online. There's books, there's social media, videos. You can visit different schooling options to see how it is. You might think a deaf school is really one way. Like when I go into a deaf school now, it's a lot different than it was 10 years ago. I see a lot of kids with cochlear implants now that I never saw 10 years ago. So, you know, the deaf schools are constantly changing. Your local school, just seeing what they have as far as options as well. I know like in Cheyenne, they're starting to do sort of site-based schools for elementary school kids who are signing. They're all going to one school within Cheyenne so that they have a little peer group. So that looks different than maybe it would look in Big Piney, where you're all, you know, in one building anyway. And what does that look like? And talking to experts. Of course, talking to experts, people who are in this field and might have some ideas and information and facts about each one of these communication approaches, but also realize that experts, we have our biases, and some of that is based on just our own philosophies, but also just what we have seen over the many years we've been in the field and what we've seen kind of play out in front of us. So yes, experts are valuable, but you are also the expert for your own child. Go ahead, Jen. I think this is yours. You're on mute. You're on mute, Jen.
Remember, one size does not fit all, and you have to do what's best for your child and your family. Okay, just because it works for this person doesn't mean it's going to work for you, or and vice versa. We did have some resources for you guys. We had if you want to click on the links or search these up, there's Hands and Voices, and then Language First and Hearing First. Those are really good websites. And then the Wyoming Department of Education has some parent resources that you can kind of look around and Google on that. And I think we do have our link here at the bottom. If you just want to Google Wyoming Department of Ed and then type in the search bar, you can type in deaf and hard of hearing, and that will take you to our website.
It's actually Wyoming Instructional Network. It's not the Wyoming Department of Ed, because it's a separate piece. So if you type in Wyoming Instructional Network, that'll take you directly to our site. Yeah.
So I think that is the end. Does anybody have any questions? No, we don't have a lot of parents here today, but
or comments.
Yeah. And if you're watching this video later and you do have questions, please contact us, because that's what we like to do is help people and give you ideas.
Well, this is Kim. I wanted to say what a great presentation this has been. It's been really nice to see all the different kind of communication options and opportunities. And I loved the addition of the assistive technology and the tactile, because I think that gets forgotten a lot. You know, and I think that's important that families know about that as well. And I also love that you put in that, you know, your needs may change. I know with raising my daughter, our needs changed. And in fact, she went from total communication approach to just oral, and then she's learned more sign language. And in certain situations, she likes speech to text, but in other situations, she likes oral only, and other times she likes to have the sign language support as well. So we have found that as she's grown, her needs have changed as she's gotten older. And that's really important, to just be flexible. And I also appreciate one more comment that you guys stated, that you don't have to be an expert to just make this decision, and you've got that support. So that's really important for families to know. Just jump in and you can change your mind.
Thanks, Kim.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and this is Olivia here, and I would just like to echo what you said, Kim. I think it's great to have all of these options laid out too, because in the beginning of the journey, you're feeling like that pressure of time is going by and you're trying to hit the window and you're trying to figure out what is going to be the best and what's going to work out for your family. And it's nice to know the different options, and like when we're the parent is speaking the same language as their early interventionist or their team, like we're all talking about the same thing. I think that's helpful too, because there's a lot of choices.
You're right. And yeah, it's important, Olivia, that you mentioned that window of opportunity for language development is short, right? It's 0 to 3, 0 to 5. And with that, even with brain development and things like that. So of course we don't want to lollygag, right? And be like, oh, that's okay. We'll just figure it out when they're 10. Then the window's closed. And so we definitely want to get in early, start working on some different things. That was good to mention that.
And then I have a question for you that I'm sure you get asked a lot because it's probably a hot topic, but on the parent side, we see a lot of different opinions, but like evidence wise or research wise or in your work experience, is it okay to do sign language and spoken language? Because sometimes you hear like, oh, that child will have a delayed oral language if you choose to do both, or we just hear a lot of mixed messages about that, and I was curious if you guys could touch on that topic.
Yeah.
Language is never going to hurt anything. It's actually going to help. So it's if as much language as you can give your child even before they can really start listening while they're still working on their devices, you have to give them some kind of a language. And even if you guys are learning at the same time, some language is better than no language at all. So I think actually, Christy, and you can correct me, I think research has shown lately that sign language is very helpful.
Yeah. And I think it's also how you approach it. Let's say I have a child who I really want to focus on listening spoken language, but then I also want to supplement with some sign. If I'm saying that I'm using both, I still want to try to combine it. Like if I just shut my voice off and I'm just signing with them all the time and I want them to be a listening and spoken language kid, that's not going to work. So it also depends on how it's approached and how you combine it, right? But I mean, okay, this is my bias. I mean, this is my professional and long-term bias from being old and seeing a lot of things. I mean, sign language, it does not keep a kid from talking. And I can just even say that with my own child who, yes, he's hearing, but we signed with him right away and he knew 600, 700 signs. And then when he talked and he realized he didn't need to use any more signs, it was over. Signing, he has no idea. Like, I'm done. Now my communication is this, and I'm going to take off with it, just like some other kids. But with kids who are deaf or hard of hearing, a lot of times it comes down to their access. What they're doing, what they're expressing, even through words or through signs, it might be different than how they're getting access to information too. So that might look different. A lot of our cochlear implant kids are talking for themselves, but they're not able to get all of that auditory information without some sort of sign support with that. And that happens too. So. And sometimes those are kids are tricky because those are the kids that teachers will say, well, they're speaking just fine. Why would they need any type of support? And it's like, well, yeah, they're speaking, but also they're in a loud classroom and there's a lot of content and maybe they need additional visual support.
Right.
And it might look
like
different.
They're doing that for 9 hours. It's not just
exactly.
1 hour.
Exactly. Yeah. And they may not need it in a class that's not real content heavy. Maybe art, they don't need an interpreter, but maybe that student is saying, no, I don't really need it here, but really I need it in social studies or in history class where there's a lot of information. Yeah. It's very individual.
Cool. Then another thing I wanted to say, because I watched the recording and you were talking about cued speech and how you were talking to a deaf individual and she said, I really prefer that because then I don't miss anything. And I follow a couple of people on social media because I think, when we don't have a lot of deaf mentors or people are with us, like how else can we access? Anyway, there's this gal that I follow and she's a new mom. She's deaf in both ears with one cochlear implant. And during labor and delivery, she requested an interpreter be in there. And she requested that the interpreter do like ASL signs, but in English word order, because she said the same thing. Like, I don't want to miss anything that provider is telling me. And, she just felt like if the interpreter was doing their thing, then she might miss something. And I thought that was really interesting too. I'm like, oh, like there's just all kinds of opportunities, and it is about, what just voice what you need and what is going to be helpful. And then she said the interpreter was just more than willing to do whatever she needed in that experience.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of speech.
Yeah. That's a really good analogy. Yeah. Because when an interpreter is interpreting, they're hearing it in English, and then they're translating it. Well, and Melissa can speak to this. She's an interpreter. They translate it into what they think it's supposed to be, in their mind, this is what it should be when I put it out. You're right. It may not be all of the information.
Yeah. Yeah. It was just something I never thought of from that perspective, because she uses ASL and yeah. Cool.
Good discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you, Olivia.
Yeah, this is a really good topic. So I'm glad that we'll have these archived for anyone coming along this journey in the future. It's really, really helpful.
Think you. Let us know if you guys need anything else.
Does anyone else want to add anything before I stop the recording? I think we're good. Okay.